So welcome to this ordinary meeting of Huddersfield Council number 4478. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and the waters that surround us, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. I don't think we have any apologies. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Thank you. I'll go to the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting now. It's actually one meeting. It's presented as two meetings in the paper because the meeting was deferred. The item in the meeting was deferred to a later date. So it's the meeting of the 27th of April 2020. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor McLaughlin.
Just a question on that.
Yes, Councillor Collins.
I just wanted to clarify as 06720 about the extension of the meeting. There's nowhere that I could find in the minutes that the meeting was called off early. My understanding is that we had till 11 o'clock, as I tried to raise at the end of the meeting, and that was the code of meeting practice at the time. So can we just get that in the minutes to make sure that that's clarified?
Well, if I could just confirm my understanding.
Yep.
The duration of a meeting is established from the code of meeting practice. There are three clauses, 3.1, 18.1 and 18.2. And they set the time for the meeting. So meetings run for 4 hours traditionally. We moved the meeting through till 6 p.m. So at 9:30 was the actual duration of the meeting plus a half an hour if the council's agreed to it, which makes 4 hours. So it's really covered in the code of meeting practice, which sets the duration of the meetings is covered by those few clauses.
It says that it's 4 hours, does it?
Say it again, sorry?
It says that it's 4 hours, does it?
It says that it starts at 7:30 and finishes at 11 with a half-hour extension if required.
Okay.
So that's the duration.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that it's 4 hours, though, does it?
Doesn't say if it's 4 hours, just sets the duration.
Okay, well, I think we need to clarify that point. Maybe we can bring it back to the next meeting if you like. But my understanding is that it was 11 o'clock in the code of meeting practice, and we at the time, and it was shut down prematurely, which I tried to raise.
Yeah, you did raise it. You did raise it. And,
so can we get clarification on that?
Sure, no trouble. We'll do that. All right, thank you. Any other questions or queries? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was a bit confused about the numbering of the meetings. I know it's a little bit picky, but we're now up to 4479, and the previous meeting was 4477. I was assuming the extraordinary meeting was 4478, but it's marked in the minutes as 4477A. So just so that there's clarity as to what the meeting numbers are from a minutes perspective, I think that's probably important to get sorted.
So the extraordinary meeting should have been 4478. We'll make that amendment. Thank you.
I believe so, if you're going to call this one 4479.
General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the meeting that was, we'll take that on notice and come back to you.
Yeah, it could go either way, couldn't it? Because it was a single item deferred. Anyway, we'll look at it and come back to you. Thank you. Any other comments on either of those sets of minutes? Can I put the motion, those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. I have two Merrill minutes. One is something which was mentioned very briefly at the last meeting, and it's a condolence message for the late Evelyn Dill Mackie. And I'd like to read it out to you. and it's that the minute be received and noted, and a letter of condolence be forwarded to Evelyn's family. It's with much sadness that I advise councillors and staff of the passing last month of Evelyn Dill Mackey, AM, at the age of 94 years. She was a local resident, an ex-employee of Hunters Hill Council. She is best remembered by the Australian swimming community as Australia's first leading lady of swimming, a sporting trailblazer and a second mum to many, especially those she led as Olympic swim team manageress. Evelyn worked for Hunters Hill Council for over 27 years, first helping out in the engineering section of office administration, and then went on to run community services and events. She retired from Hunters Hill Council in 1997. Her contribution to the community includes Vice President of the local Ryde Swimming Club, with dynamic coaching duo Forbes and Ursula Carlisle at the helm. During its golden years in the 70s, where the likes of Shane Gould, Gail Neal, Jenny Turrell and Sally Lockyer ruled the pool, later becoming the foundation president of the Carlisle Swimming Club. In 1992, she was elected the 14th president and first female president of Swimming Australia. In 1997, she was elected as the first female life member of Swimming Australia and also awarded Member of the Order of Australia AM for service to swimming as an Olympic team administrator and as president of Swimming Australia. A lady with a golden heart, she had time for everybody and managed the Australian Olympic teams in Montreal, Los Angeles, Seoul, and also in 1986, the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh. On behalf of Council, I extend to Evelyn's son and Hunters Hill residents, Richard and wife Susie Nee Landels and daughter Suzanne and their respective families, our sincere condolence as we fondly and formally remember their dear, loved mother and grandmother who contributed so much to our community. I'd like to move that and have a seconder in Councillor Williams. All in favour? Thank you, councillors. I have another one, somebody who made an important contribution to the fabric of Hunters Hill, and that's the late Jack Mundy. So the recommendation of the minute be received and noted, and a letter of condolence be forwarded to Jack's family. It's with much sadness I advise council and council staff of the passing of Jack Mundy at the age of 90. Veteran unionist and environmentalist, Jack campaigned to protect and support the battlers of Kelly Bush in 1970 and 71, which resulted in the first historic green ban that subsequently led to other green bans and heritage protections that are now enshrined in legislation. At the time, A.V. Jennings had planned a proposal for Kelly's Bush site, including 3 8-storey buildings with a total of 147 home units. One of Kelly's Bush battlers, Monica Sheehan, said that it had been cowardice that led her to write to the unions seeking help to save Kelly's Bush. My friends told me that I would have to lie in front of bulldozers if I wanted to save Kelly's Bush. If I was going to have to do that, I wanted to know what side the people driving the bulldozers were on, she said. Mrs. Sheehan said a letter she wrote to the union representing the bulldozer drivers led to the involvement of Mr. Mundy and the Green Band in saving Kelly's Bush. During the Green Bans, Mr. Mundy organised builders to refuse to work on projects they perceived to be environmentally or socially undesirable. These green bans stopped some of Sydney's most famous areas from development, stopping developers at the Rocks, and in recent times, Jack fought against development and campaigned to protect historical sites, including the Sirius building, and the Bondi Pavilion, and also changes in the Botanical Gardens. On behalf of Council, I extend to Jack's wife, Judy, and family our sincere condolences as we fondly and formally remember his contribution to our community. We may not have always agreed with Jack's politics, but we certainly respected what he did for our Hunters Hill community. This place would have been much different in terms of green environment and heritage had it not been for that time. So I'd like to move that. Have a seconder in Councillor Sanderson. All in favour? Thank you, councillors. I move to item 4.1.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Williams.
Yep. We moved through both of those condolences very quickly, but I had association with those people back in the 80s and 90s, and I'd just like to make a couple of comments, if I may.
Please do. Please go ahead.
In regard to Evelyn, she was a dedicated person, not only to Swimming Australia, and contributed greatly to the success of several Olympic teams and the growth of swimming in Australia, but also was a dedicated local who provided extensive and long-term service through the council and through our activities locally, particularly through the local swimming groups. So I'd like to just recognise from somebody that worked with her back in the 80s and 90s on council, our sincere thanks for her support to our community over those many years, and the sadness that with her passing. In regards to Jack Mundy, he was a true supporter of Hunters Hill, and Kelly's Bush was only part of his passion for outcomes in Sydney. I had a bit to do with him back in the early 90s when in those days he was still very much a strong advocate for Kelly's Bush, and not only the time he spent previously saving it, but also ensuring that its longevity and its health was maintained into the future. And I recall the celebrations we had there, I think it was the 21st anniversary, and his strong commitment to both Kelly's Bush, in particular the Hunters Hill community, for the way that they stood for what was right and what was important in our local community. So I'd just like to pass those couple of personal comments in relation to both those people that contributed significantly to the Hunters Hill community.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Sanderson. Just one moment. We just activate your mic, please. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to endorse both your own comments and those of Councillor Williams. In respect of Jack Mundy, having just recently studied development and planning law as an extra subject at UNSW, and having seen the history and the big part that both Hunters Hill and Jack Mundy played. He also played an amazing role in the rocks, and when you look at the proposals that were around at that time, that would have seen so much heritage in that area just completely destroyed. One of the great legacies of Jack Mundy and all the others who worked with him is that we have that heritage remaining. And in our case, it was open space, but equally, the principles that were set down at those times need to apply to all of the wonderful aspects of Hunters Hill: heritage, open space, bushland, the whole gamut. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. And both, I didn't know Evelyn Dilmacki all that well, but again, both contributors to our amazing municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No further comments. We'll move to Council Reports, item 4.1. The recommendations there on page 1, that the report be received and noted, and the variations to the 1920 budget as outlined to the be adopted. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Collins. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Sanderson.
Yep.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a comprehensive report that we've received from the staff in relation to the quarterly budget review. And as we can see in the documentation, that council has been working hard over the last couple of years to rein back some of the deficits in our budget. And I can see on page 2 of the papers that it was predicted that we'd have a surplus this year, a modest surplus of 26,000. clearly that's now been impacted by the COVID-19 series of events, and I'm not quite sure where things will settle at the end of the financial year, but I think it's important, as I've raised previously, that we clearly identify what the costs are associated with COVID-19 and its impact on our finances in council, because these, to a large extent, are out of our control and have been driven by other factors. And I think it's important for us to be able to discern how we're tracking on our finances through the levers that we're pulling versus what the impact is by the economic changes associated with our current circumstances. So I think that needs to be very explicit and clear in the documentation. I know it's referred to, but I feel it needs to be separated out in more detail as to what our planned process is and was, and where we've got to as a result of those changes that have occurred. So I commend the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Collins, just one moment, we turn your mic on. Councillor Collins.
Well, a couple of things. So just in relation to what Councillor Williams is, we're actually, my understanding from this report is that the variations result in a projected operational deficit of 421,000 actually becoming a surplus. Am I reading that correctly? Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager?
Sure, General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes.
So our position is actually better than predicted.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, than the adopted budget, yes.
Okay. Well, I thought I should make that clear. One other thing I might bring to attention is it seems like we've finally got an answer to the bus shelter contract revenue. Sorry, $155,000 will not actually be recognised as revenue. Is that correct for you, Mr. General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's revenue, but the accounting treatment of that 155,000 will be spread across a period of time. I'll ask the Director of Finance and Corporate Strategy to explain why it was necessary to do that with that 155,000. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. So the accounting standard requires us to recognise any obligations, future obligations. The contract with Council and O Media largely omits maintenance except for the upgrade of the footpaths and maintenance of the actual footpaths. So the calculation that we've put away is 155,000 based on the number of bus shelters in that contract over the 17-year period and the cost of square metres to update footpaths on the footprint. So that 155,000 will move over to long-term liabilities.
Mm-hmm. So $1 million won't be recognised in this year. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, we received $1 million in revenue. The treatment of that $1 million from an accounting perspective was something that the Director of Finance and Corporate Strategy discussed with the external auditors in light of the new accounting standards. Director, is there anything else you want to add to that?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I just might say that and I know we've discussed this a few times, that the mayoral column indicated there will be $1 million of revenue recognised in this financial year. That's not actually true. And so I think it would be important perhaps for the Mayor to clarify that in the next column, because the statement, whilst perhaps made in good faith, wasn't actually correct.
Thank you, Councillor. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, just if you could do that, then
I'll consider it. I'll consider it. Thank you.
I'll put that as a question without notice then.
All right. Councillors, any further questions? Any further comments? All right, I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. All in favour. So we move to item 4.2, the draft 2020 operational plan and budget. The recommendations there on page 18. Have I got a mover? Nobody willing to move it? I'll move that. By seconder, Councillor Krasoy. So, councillors, there's an enormous amount of work in putting this together each year. I'm sure some of you have looked at it with a great deal of interest. I don't think I want to say much more than I think the staff have done a great job. I think it's a challenge. It's about balancing priorities and making sure that you've made the best decisions you possibly can when looking at these things. And so I recommend it to you. Anybody wishing to speak against? Councillor Collins.
Sorry, I've got questions first, if I may.
Please go ahead.
First of all, I just wanted to clarify right at the top in the leadership and governance expenses of 4,623,265 and 14 cents. I've got it on
page number, please, Councillor.
I'll give you a page number. Yep. Page number is, it should be page 73. And then for 2021, the expense is 4,623,265. But down in page, where are we? On page 78, the number's different. It's 463,2544, and I just wanted to understand how that number came about. I'm sure there's a reason. I just can't seem to get to the bottom of it. In the spreadsheet, it's line 24, if that helps.
We're looking at the printed papers. We don't have the spreadsheets in front of us.
I wonder if staff might have it, potentially.
General Manager?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, refer to the Director of Finance and Corporate Strategy.
Sorry, Councillor Collins, on page 79, is it?
Yeah, so so on page 78, where you've got the estimate draft and total total expenditure under leadership and governance. 4632544. It's different from the number up in the top line item. It's only $9,278 difference, but I'm wondering if it includes something else that's not reflected in the papers.
So
we can, if you want me, I can go on while you.
Yeah, I think we'll take it on notice. We just
it's actually pretty important. It can't go on notice, but I'm happy to go through some other questions.
All right, well, we'll wait then. We'll wait then, Councillor.
and then on page 73, is it?
Yeah, page 73, under leadership and governance,
Fine.
where it says 4623265.
I'd have to go back to the spreadsheet. 46235. Okay.
I'll go to my other questions if you like. Give it, yeah. Now, my other, with the Priory, I wanted to find out when we're expecting to get any rent for that, because it's booked as having rent as per the agreement for this for the next financial year, and I thought it was not, you know, like I thought it was not starting yet. Like, when do they start paying rent, if I can?
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So with the Priory, where that sits at Riverglade Reserve, at the moment we're at the end stage of the draft plan of management, and once that comes to council, it goes out on exhibition and goes through the process. Council some time ago undertook an expression of interest process, and we have a proposed operator subject to the completion of that plan of management. I'll need to go and have a detailed review of the lease. This predates me, so I'll need to go back and review the terms of that lease, Councillor Collins, and provide that to you on notice.
My question's not the amount, but I just would have thought they wouldn't be paying any rent any time soon. I understand that there's, I wouldn't expect any money in the next financial year, or would that be?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'd need to go and look at the terms of that lease and confirm that. I need to look at the detail of what the agreement was at the time.
Okay.
And that was negotiated.
Because it's $40,000. I just thought it might be a little bit early before. Okay. Just a couple more. So with the Buffalo Creek parking meters, I know that's something that we've been we've discussed about. The parking meters, I believe they expire this year. Now I've got the, just bring it up. Sorry. The parking fees for Buffalo Creek, it looks like they are going to be halved. Is that the estimate based on the effects of what's going on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director.
That's right. So in the quarterly review, we took a projection initially when COVID first came in, and we did take a conservative estimate. So we've, and this budget has been a conservative estimate in terms of income revenue. So yes, that is what we initially anticipated.
And does it normally bring 30,000 or so? Is that right?
What we saw happening initially is, yes, and what we saw happening initially, from what I understand of the feedback, is people not wanting to, just from the social distancing, we've seen that. So, and at the time of preparation of the budget, the initial stages, we weren't really clear on how long the social distancing will last and the parameters.
So given that the parking meters, they cost, we've got two down there and they cost $8,000 each under the contract for the lease and the maintenance and the service. So that means that these parking meters at Buffalo Creek are actually going to lose money? Is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, probably two comments, and then I'll defer to the Director of Service Delivery. At the moment, we're anticipating a reduction in fees because of the COVID response, and therefore there are financial implications because of that, not unlike any other, not unlike other services or facilities that are impacted. We are looking at parking meters and the technology that's being used. Director of Service Delivery and Special Projects, would you like to add to that?
Councillors and General Manager, I wonder if we might take a short recess. We've got a problem with the live feed out to the community. I've just been made aware of it, and with your approval, Councillor Miles, second to Councillor Williams, we'd just take a 5-minute break and see if we can get it back up So we've had a call from a member of the community saying they're unable to see it. So take a break for 5 minutes and we'll be back. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff.